Everyone thought Elias Tran was invisible. Just another waiter in a sea of white tablecloths and crystal glasses. Another quiet man serving people who never looked him in the eye. But on a Friday night in September, when Senator Marcus Halden sat down at table 12 and started speaking a language he thought no one else understood, Elias Tran released one sentence, 7 words, and the most powerful man in the room crumbled. This is the story of how a soft-spoken waiter destroyed a politician's entire illusion of power. Not with violence, not with money, but with the truth spoken in perfect, undeniable fluency. Life has a habit of underestimating the quiet ones, the people who listen more than they speak, the ones who carry entire histories behind their eyes, histories of loss, survival, education, war, histories that powerful men never bother to ask about. Because in their world, silence equals ignorance. Invisibility equals stupidity. And a man pouring wine could never possibly be someone who once stood in front of university lecture halls. They were wrong, and Elias Tran was about to prove it. Before we dive deeper into Elias's story, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. And drop a comment below. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Now let's go back to the beginning. Elias Tran was 34 years old. He worked double shifts at the Silver Apex, a luxury rooftop restaurant overlooking the city's financial district. Glass walls, velvet seats, wine lists longer than most novels. The kind of place where a single bottle of champagne cost more than Elias made in a week. To the guests, he was nobody. A shadow refilling water glasses, a figure clearing plates. Polite, efficient, forgettable. The regulars never learned his name. The tourists treated him like furniture. Even the other staff barely knew him. He showed up early, worked quietly, and left without complaints. He didn't gossip, didn't drink after shifts, didn't talk about his past. But Elias wasn't always a waiter. 12 years ago, he was a graduate student at the National University of Political Sciences in his home country, a small nation most Americans couldn't find on a map. He studied political linguistics, the way leaders used language to manipulate, deceive, and consolidate power. He wrote papers, published research, presented at conferences. He spoke 6 languages fluently: English, French, Mandarin, Arabic, Spanish, and his native tongue, a language most Westerners had never heard of. He was brilliant. He was respected. He had a future. And then the war came. The conflict started over borders, over oil, over old grudges between men who would never fight their own battles. Elias watched his university burn. He watched colleagues disappear. He watched his younger sister killed in a bombing that was called collateral damage on international news broadcasts. When the government began arresting intellectuals, anyone who might question, might organize, might think, Elias knew he had 2 choices: stay and die, or run and survive. He chose survival. He fled with nothing but a backpack, fake documents, and the languages in his head. He crossed 3 borders, slept in refugee camps, lived on charity and desperation. And when he finally arrived in America, the country that had promised freedom and opportunity in every movie he'd ever seen, he discovered that his degrees meant nothing here. His research didn't transfer. His credentials weren't recognized. His accent was too thick. His name was too hard to pronounce. So Elias Tran, who once taught rooms full of students about the corruption of language in authoritarian regimes, became a man who served soup to people who never said thank you. And he did it in silence. Because silence was survival. The Silver Apex wasn't just a restaurant. It was a theater, a stage where the wealthy performed for each other. CEOs closed deals over Wagyu steaks. Lawyers whispered about settlements over wine. Politicians smiled for cameras and schemed in private booths. The staff moved like ghosts, perfectly trained, perfectly invisible. One mistake could mean dismissal, a spilled drink, a forgotten order, a moment of visible exhaustion. The manager, a thin man named Gerald with cold eyes, ran the floor like a military operation. Smile, but not too much. Speak, but only when spoken to. Never make the guests uncomfortable. Elias followed every rule. He perfected the art of disappearing while still being present. He learned how to read a table in seconds, who needed attention, who wanted to be ignored, who would complain no matter what. He moved between tables like water, smooth, quiet, essential, and utterly unremarkable. And every night, as he wiped down tables after the last guest left, he told himself the same thing. This is temporary. This is survival. One day things will be different. But 12 years had passed, and nothing had changed. Until tonight. Senator Marcus Halden arrived at 7:45 p.m. 3 black SUVs pulled up to the valet stand. Security swept the entrance. A small crowd of staffers followed him like pilot fish trailing a shark. Halden was 52. Silver hair styled perfectly. A smile that had been tested in focus groups and refined over decades. A handshake that conveyed power and warmth in equal measure. He was a rising star in national politics. A moderate who appealed to both sides. A man who spoke about unity, compassion, and the dignity of every American. His campaign slogan was plastered on billboards across the state. A voice for the voiceless. But people who worked with Halden knew the truth. In private, away from cameras, he was cruel. He screamed at assistants over minor mistakes. He fired people for sport. He mocked anyone he considered beneath him, which was almost everyone. And he had secrets. Financial deals with foreign lobbyists. Offshore accounts. Payments disguised as consulting fees. All of it conducted in languages most Americans didn't speak. Because Halden was fluent in 3 languages. And he used that fluency like a weapon, to hide, to deceive, to insult without consequence. Tonight, he was dining with 2 senior aides and a campaign strategist. Table 12. Corner booth. Privacy curtains drawn. And Elias Tran was assigned to serve them. From the moment Halden sat down, he started complaining. This water is room temperature. I asked for cold. Elias nodded. I'll bring you a fresh glass immediately, sir. And don't take forever about it. Elias replaced the water in 30 seconds. Halden didn't acknowledge it. When Elias brought the wine, Halden inspected the bottle like it was evidence in a criminal trial. This vintage is supposed to be stored at 55 degrees. Did you check? Yes, sir. Our sommelier confirmed. I wasn't asking for a story. Just bring the damn wine. The aides laughed. Elias poured carefully, one hand behind his back, exactly as trained. Halden sipped, frowned. It's oxidized. It wasn't. Elias knew wine. This bottle was perfect. But he didn't argue. I'll bring another bottle, sir. Make sure this one isn't garbage. Elias brought a second bottle. Then a third. Halden sent both back for invented reasons. The aides smirked. One of them whispered something that made them all laugh. Elias's hands trembled slightly as he poured the 4th bottle. Not from fear. From restraint. From the effort it took to swallow humiliation and keep his face blank. He'd done this for 12 years. He could do it one more night. As dinner progressed, Halden grew louder. He talked about his campaign. About polling numbers. About how he was going to win over working-class voters with his message of compassion. His aide asked, "What about the immigrant communities? They're a growing voting bloc." Halden smiled his focus group smile. "We'll release a statement. Something about opportunity and the American dream. The usual." Then he leaned back in his chair and switched languages. He spoke in the tongue of Elias's home country, a language most Americans had never heard. Elias was clearing plates from the next table. His hands froze for half a second. Halden said, in that language, "They don't actually care about policy. They just want to hear that we care. Give them a few token programs and they'll vote for us. It's that simple." The aides, who also spoke the language, laughed. Elias continued clearing plates. Halden continued. "The refugee workers at these places, they're useful for optics. Shows we support hardworking immigrants. But honestly, most of them shouldn't even be here." More laughter. Elias set down the plates in the kitchen. His jaw was tight. His heart pounded. But he returned to the floor. Silent. As dessert arrived, Halden's conversation grew uglier. He started talking about policy proposals, but in a way that contradicted everything he said publicly. In English, for the cameras, we must protect immigrant families. In private, in another language, we'll tighten enforcement quietly, deport more, but keep the rhetoric soft. His aide asked about a refugee aid program Halden publicly supported. Halden waved his hand dismissively and said, in that foreign language, it's a photo op. We'll fund it minimally, take the credit, and move on. No one actually tracks these things. Elias stood 5 feet away, refilling water glasses at the next table. Every word landed like a stone in his chest. He'd fled a war caused by men like this. Men who smiled in public and schemed in private. Men who spoke of compassion while treating human lives like statistics. He wanted to walk away. He wanted to scream. But he needed this job. So he stayed silent. And then Halden made his final mistake. Halden noticed Elias standing nearby. He turned to his aide and said, in that same foreign language, loud enough for Elias to hear, look at him. He's been hovering all night. Probably doesn't understand a word we're saying. People like him, they come here, take jobs, but they never really integrate. They stay in their little bubbles. The aide smirked. At least he's polite. Halden laughed. Polite because he has to be. If he knew what we were really saying, he'd probably cry. They all laughed. Elias stood there, holding a water pitcher. His hands shook. Not with fear, with rage, with humiliation, with the weight of 12 years of biting his tongue, lowering his eyes, pretending not to understand when people insulted him in languages they thought he didn't speak. But this time was different, because Elias Tran had spent 12 years being invisible. And tonight he decided to be seen. Elias set down the water pitcher carefully. He straightened. He walked directly to Halden's table. And in perfect native-level fluency, with the educated accent of someone who had spent years studying political rhetoric, he spoke, in Halden's language. Senator, should I translate your real opinions for the cameras outside? Or would you prefer to do that yourself? The table went silent. The aides froze mid-laugh. Halden's smile vanished. His face drained of color. He stared at Elias like he'd just seen a ghost. Because it wasn't just that Elias spoke the language. It was how he spoke it. Flawlessly. With the tone of an educated man. With the precision of someone who understood not just the words, but the implications. Halden's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. You speak? Elias smiled. Calm. Controlled. Yes, Senator. I speak 6 languages. I also hold a graduate degree in political linguistics. I spent 5 years researching how politicians use private language to obscure public corruption. He paused. Perhaps you've read my work. Halden hadn't, but he understood the threat instantly. Elias continued, still calm, still measured. I've been standing here all evening, Senator. I've heard every word. I know exactly what you think of refugee workers. I know your real policies differ significantly from your public statements. I know about the language you use to hide deals with foreign interests. Halden tried to recover, tried to smile. There's been a misunderstanding. Elias switched to English. There's no misunderstanding, Senator. You assumed I was stupid because I serve food. You assumed I was powerless because I'm quiet. You assumed you could say anything because people like me don't matter. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Other diners glanced over. Halden's aides looked like they wanted to disappear. The senator tried one more time. Look, I didn't mean. You meant every word, Elias said. And now you're afraid. Not because I misunderstood, but because I understood perfectly. He leaned forward slightly. I've spent 12 years being invisible, Senator. 12 years watching men like you build empires on the backs of people you consider beneath you. 12 years staying silent because silence kept me safe. But tonight, I want you to know something. I see you. I hear you. And I understand exactly who you are. The silence was deafening. Halden sat frozen. His usual confidence, the armor he wore in every TV interview, Every press conference, every debate had shattered. He looked small, exposed, powerless. Finally, he cleared his throat. "What do you want?" Elias didn't hesitate. "I want you to treat the staff here like human beings. I want you to apologize to every person you've insulted tonight. And I want you to remember this moment every time you think about using your power to humiliate someone you consider beneath you." Halden nodded quickly, desperately. "Of course. Absolutely. I'll make a donation. To immigrant worker programs. A significant donation." "Good," Elias said. "But do it quietly. No press releases. No photo ops. Just do it because it's right." Halden agreed to everything. And as Elias walked away from that table, he felt something he hadn't felt in 12 years. Dignity. Word spread quickly. A journalist dining 3 tables away had heard parts of the exchange. By morning, an anonymous tip appeared in a political blog. Senator Halden's private dinner turns uncomfortable after waiter speaks his language. The story didn't name Elias, but it described the incident, and it raised questions about Halden's private versus public positions on immigration. The senator's office issued a statement about misunderstandings and cultural sensitivity training, but the damage was done. Within weeks, recordings of Halden's foreign lobby meetings, conducted in that same language, began leaking. His poll numbers dropped. His campaign faltered. By the next election, he lost his seat. But Elias didn't celebrate. He simply kept working. 2 weeks after that Friday night, Elias received a phone call. A professor from a nearby university had heard about the incident. Not from the news. From another waiter who'd been there that night. The professor was impressed. Not just by the story, but by Elias's background. 6 languages, graduate degree, research in political linguistics. "Why are you working as a waiter?" Elias explained. "The war, the lost credentials, the years of starting over." The professor listened. And then she made an offer. "We have a program for displaced scholars. Full scholarship. We help people finish their degrees, get credentialed here. It's designed for people exactly like you." Elias was silent. "You'd be perfect for our cultural mediation program. We train people to work with refugees, helping them navigate legal systems, translate documents, understand their rights. People who've walked that path themselves." Elias felt something crack open in his chest. Hope. 6 months later, Elias enrolled. He studied at night, worked reduced shifts at the restaurant during the day. It was exhausting, but for the first time in 12 years, he wasn't just surviving. He was building. He finished his degree in cultural mediation and refugee advocacy. He graduated with honors. And he was offered a position with a nonprofit that helped refugees navigate the American legal system. Translating documents, explaining rights, connecting families with resources. He accepted immediately. Elias became exceptional at his work. Not because he was brilliant, though he was, but because he understood. He knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to speak and not be heard. He worked with families fleeing violence, with students trying to finish school, with workers trapped in exploitative jobs. He translated, he advocated, he fought, and he did it all quietly. No press conferences, no social media campaigns, just patient, relentless work. One family at a time, one case at a time. Within 2 years, he'd helped over 300 families. Some found jobs. Some reunited with relatives. Some finally felt safe for the first time in years. And every single one of them remembered the quiet man with gentle eyes who spoke their language and made them feel human again. 3 years after that Friday night, Elias received an invitation. A new community center was opening, a space dedicated to refugee services, education, and cultural exchange. They wanted him to speak at the opening ceremony. He almost declined. Public speaking felt uncomfortable after so many years of silence. But he went. And when he stood at that podium, looking out at a room full of people, refugees, advocates, students, volunteers, he realized something. He was no longer invisible. Not because he'd become loud, but because he'd chosen to use his voice at the exact moment it mattered most. And that single sentence, those 7 words spoken to a powerful man who thought he could never be challenged, had changed everything, not just for Elias, but for everyone who'd ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told their voice didn't matter. Never underestimate the quiet ones. They see more than you think. They hear more than you realize. They understand far more than arrogance can imagine. Because silence is not ignorance. And invisibility is not weakness. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is wait for the exact right moment and speak one perfect sentence. Power means nothing when wisdom stands in the room. And dignity cannot be taken from someone who refuses to surrender it. Elias Tran learned that lesson the hard way. But when he finally spoke, the world listened. If the story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another episode of Behind the Billions. We share stories of power, secrets, and the people who expose them. Drop a comment and let us know, where are you watching from? And have you ever had a moment where you finally spoke up after staying silent? We love hearing your stories. Until next time, remember, your voice matters, even if the world hasn't heard it yet.